introduction to the label L Saha?
Absolutely. So L Saha started as an idea many years before it actually started. So when I was studying fashion design, I always wanted to start my own label, but I wasn't quite sure what it would be like. I think, but when I came to England to do my masters, I had the opportunity to work as a buyer, and it was during my work as a fashion buyer that I understood a lot of aspects of fashion that as a design student I was never exposed to. You know, the speed at which products are made and introduced in the market, and almost how marketing is acting as a manipulative tool to make customers think that they need a lot more than they actually need. They're almost enticed to buy into product because of the pricing structure and often on sale at full price, those kind of aspects. So working as a fashion buyer, I got to learn a lot of those aspects, and it was during then that I decided that L Saha would be a lot about less is more, but also about timeless collection that don't date and that are design-led rather than trend-led, and that are also made using sustainable principles that are careful in the way the processes are, but also careful in the way people in the supply chain are treated, and almost putting that at the forefront of what we do, because at the end, coming from India, I think a lot of what I understood is the value in a product is the value in the craftsmanship. It's not so much, traditional Indian products are not so much about which French house or Italian house it comes from, because it's because the value comes from what is the product made of and how was it made. Those are the inherent things. And so the tagline of the brand, or L Saha, started to stand for in its early days as timeless true luxury brand, which not only creates timeless collection, but is also careful about the processes, the people behind the processes, and also how we act as a platform to highlight some of the pillars, the strengths behind the product. So therefore, L Saha was born, 2014. I graduated from Masters 2012, so 2 years after I graduated.
Within the industry, and sort of wanting to be slightly separate from some of the things that you sort of witnessed. I've heard that you describe the label as being pro-planet and pro-people. And I was wondering if you could speak a bit more about what that means in practice.
Of course. So pro-planet, because there's no other way. Businesses normally operate with the motive to create profit, but every business should be pro-planet, because if you don't have a safe planet to live in, what would be the profit? So I think pro-planet through the choices we made by using the materials we use, by using down to packaging. As of 2019, we eliminated any plastic used in our packaging, and even with our wholesale orders at the time, we were individually wrapping items with tissue as opposed to plastic. And not just that, even with our supply, we have a strict guideline not to send us garments in plastic films or plastic hangers. We replace them with cardboard hangers. So I think the industry collectively has a huge role to play in minimizing its damage, and that also how we try to do that in the best way we can through our small operations. I think, and pro-planet, because I think if you look behind the scene, I think brands often encourage people behind the scene to stay behind the scene. I was mentioning earlier about garments being embroidered in other countries and then manufactured or assembled in other countries, whereas the made-in garment comes from the European country because it appears that it's more expensive to make there. Whereas, some kind of craftsmanship is not available elsewhere. If I'm looking at a Chanel haute couture dress, and it was made in the atelier in France, that's totally understandable that it's an haute couture item. But a lot of embroidered pieces you see in the market that are actually embroidered in India are not labeled as made in India. So I think that's coming from India. I felt the onus or responsibility to put our craftspeople or artisans at the forefront. And back in the days, before TQR code, every garment label had a name of the person who made it. So it was called the Made by tag, and it got spoken about in 2014, 2015. It got spoken about in press. But since we introduced what we call the transparency QR code, which is a code that takes you to a page that tells you everything about the garment, where the materials are from, who made the dress, how many hours took the embroidery. It's not with embroidery, how many hours took to make the dress. So sharing as much info as possible about the product, because I think customers have the right to acknowledge that they're choosing a product. So that's kind of pro people in the sense that we try to. Our people is not the people who are selling to. Our people is people who are actually holding the foundation behind the product, who are putting together the product. So.
It's really interesting to hear how your sort of ways of working have evolved over time, going from the label to a QR code. And I assume in the future there'll be sort of more technological advances that will tell your client more.
Yeah, certainly. I think as we speak, there is a lot happening in the technological world that we are excited about, how we can incorporate that as well. I mean, I think blockchain has been around for some time, and these are simplistic way of including, high-tech ways of making things more transparent. I think we're always into learning and incorporating those, so not to be excited there.
And in terms of, so you're talking about not wanting to be pushed by sort of seasonal trends all the time, but having a slightly different way of working. And I know you tend to show twice a year with the Fashion Week, but I suppose your collections have a slightly different focus, or your design has a slightly different focus to sort of very trend-led designs. And I was wondering how you go about sort of what you present each season.
So I think when we introduce new seasons in the London Fashion Week, so following the fashion calendar as it is, it's more about putting together an offering rather than putting together a new collection. So we blend pieces that are old and new to present it in a way or style it in a way in our lookbooks and the way we present it in a more relevant way. So February we introduced the Autumn Winter 21 collection at London Fashion Week, and even at Autumn Winter 21 we had pieces that were from as early as Spring Summer 14. So my first ever collection was part of that. So I think we live by that timeless principle that a garment that is designed in a way that is not following particular rules, it follows the customer's need and what fits well in her wardrobe. It doesn't become outdated with time. So, and there are numerous examples, like Autumn Winter 21 and Spring Summer 14 is probably one of the longest difference. But even today, you have pieces here which were first released in 2017 and after. So it's putting together the story which is relevant today, as opposed to just introducing more products. And I think that empowers the customers in a way that our products never go on sale, never ever go on sale. So if you bought something full price from us in 2017, it's still the latest collection. So I think it empowers the customer that they've made the right choice and they can keep having it in their wardrobe. So
I guess each runway show or lookbook, in a way, you then get to showcase to your client how they can restyle and update the pieces they already have.
Yeah, to some extent that, and also I think to also make it relevant to another group of people who may not have seen that product before. Or I think there's always evolution, right? I think even my customer from 2015 is a different woman today. So she has evolved. So although she has the same dress in her wardrobe, she wears it differently because she's 3 years older and her life has changed. And so I think it's many layers to that. And I think as a brand, we want to be that empowering brand that doesn't tell you need this dress to be fashionable. You have that dress, you're fashionable, okay? I mean, of course, if you like newer pieces in the collection, you're more than welcome to, add more to your personal wardrobe. But I think it's not about, how marketing campaigns say, this is the it bag you must have this season. I think that's very time frame, right? It's kind of self-defeating in the sense that in the next 6 months, I'm going to tell you another bag is the it bag. So I don't buy into that idea.
So So I read about your graduate collection, which I know is quite a long time ago, but it was praised for using traditional textiles, but used in a modern context. And I sort of pick up that that's still something that you carry through in your design today. How do you go about sort of sourcing those textiles or adapting them in slightly different ways?
I think traditional textile in the sense, my graduation collection was actually made from blends of jute, and not many people know that, but the reason I kept coming from Bengal and India, it was a state that was very, in a way the economy had a big part to play in its industry, the jute textile in particular. But over the past decade, it has deteriorated quite a lot. So when I was working on my graduation collection, I knew about that fact, that what was once known as the golden fiber, which was a really profitable industry for the entire state, was actually struggling. So my motive as a graduating designer was to incorporate that in a fashion context. And I actually found a jute company, I still remember the name, it was called Interstate Shamlal Jutes. It was a family-run company. I approached them to give me jute textile to be used for fashion. And that's how I used traditional textile in a very different context, which fashion is not very accommodating, using jute. More so maybe in accessories than in clothing. So that's, I think, the reason why I got acknowledged by the Institute of Textile that was part of the university. But I think when I look at textiles now, traditional in the sense that there are pieces in this collection that uses textile that are made on hand loom, which is a simplified machine operated on by hand to mix the warp and the weft of the textile, to come up with a textile that looks like a full piece. And they actually need even long pieces of cloth like saris, which is like 7.5 meter long. Mm-hmm. So we use that kind of textile coming from really rural parts of Bengal, where a single person is on this machine, and So I think it's beautiful in the sense that even though we are technologically very advanced, we are still able to appreciate things that are slow to make, impossible to manufacture in mass, because I think that's a big challenge in the industry. Anything that a high-end brand sells, compared to if it's sold by a high street brand at a fraction of the price, it's always economies of scale. They can get the prices down, not because it's more superior, because we get it down because it's sold in thousands of pieces. So by incorporating traditional processes, we are able to keep that exclusivity, because a high street brand can't go and ask them to make handloom items. It's just not possible. The same for the embroidered pieces, which take hundreds of hours to embroider, cannot be replicated because it will never be able to be sold at that price point in the high street. So I think incorporating tradition and some of the traditional craftsmanship, I think, is our differentiator and the strength. Although it's, maybe in fashion, it's about speed, so it's not a traditional way of looking at it, but it's an interesting angle.
But I suppose as well, the fact that it takes hundreds of hours to create one of your pieces, or some of your pieces, means that there is that element of exclusivity, because it's not possible for you to make, hundreds. So these pieces are, well, they're not necessarily not unique, but one of very few.
Yeah, I think we like to say, especially pieces like the Masai and the Cleopatra, and there are some other pieces that are, because of the amount of work that goes on behind it, even if your lifetime you don't get hundreds of wear or many wear out of them, you can pass it down to the next generation loved one as an heirloom, because it's not valuable because it came from my brand. It's valuable because so much love, care, and artistry went into making that product. So I think that's what luxury in its root is. When you see luxury, in its root is exclusive by default because it's a slower process and so forth. But it doesn't have to come from a well-known luxury house, So I think we try to keep the core values intact for some of these products. but also we want to appeal to a younger customer who's able to buy into another product, which is maybe does not take embroidery, but still has aspects of, a certified textile, which is, made in a way that's low impact on the planet, that can still be relevant in their wardrobe, taken care of, and they can probably get a lot more wear out of it because it's not embroidered, it's an everyday item.
Yeah. Okay, so can you talk us through your design process? Does it start with the textile? Is that what inspired you, or are there sort of other ideas that spark off the design?
I think it changes every time. There's no one formula that I use, but sometimes I've come across a really interesting piece of material, or the process behind the material is interesting, like handloom, and when I got to know that we could get some textile into that. It was a process we definitely want to look at, but the collection as a whole has a bigger, kind of wider story, and often inspiration in the more recent years have come from outside of space, outside of the Earth, like, the planetary movements and, the force of different cosmic aspects and the constellations and how things are all interconnected. We think that every animal and every people are interconnected in the ecosystem here, but actually the planet Earth is a part of a bigger ecosystem, which is, outside. So it's almost esoteric to think about, but I am inspired by those things. And I think sometimes, if you are receptive of it, there are huge powers that can work through it, you will find. And I find that very magical.
Is that so? You mentioned something about this and making it a particular time in the unit.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know if many people can relate to it, but I'm a big believer in moon cycles and lunar cycles and the impact it has on human beings. Sometimes it makes us more sensitive, sometimes more emotional, and it changes the tides. You can imagine those are huge water bodies, but we're also a large part of water, so it definitely impacts us. So I started making this dress on the full moon lunar eclipse night, which was 26th of May, and it took me about 6 days to make it. But I wanted to set an intention when I was making the dress, because if you look closely, some of you may be familiar, if you know the brand longer, that the woven dresses are actually 100% handmade, and it involves only knotting. So there's no machinery, no nothing, just hand and yarn. So because there are so many knots, I find this process to be almost meditative. So when I was starting the dress, I wanted to set a reason behind the meditation almost. When we meditate, sitting, just meditating, we always have an intention for meditating. But when I was making this dress, my intention was to kind of pray for global health and well-being, not less because of what's going on outside, and also because my whole family is in India and what's going on there. So I think it felt like the right kind of thing to pray for. So I think in the future when I handmade things, I will always set an intention, because there is power in intention, like there's power in dreams and, in setting goals and so forth. So yeah, I think almost a very, I don't know, it's me. I find that I'm a believer, it doesn't matter what it is I believe in, but I believe in something higher. So